Awesome. Hello and welcome everyone to our first virtual event of the month. Excited to have you all here, but before we get started, my team and I would like to the land, acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and would like to pay respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people joining us today. So next slide, please. So we've got a brief overview of what GDSE is, then we'll start to talk, and lastly we'll have a Q&A session and feedback survey session at the end. I will wrap up shortly after that. Next slide, please. So a brief overview of what GDSE is. So the Google Developer Student Clubs is a global community that empowers university students to grow their knowledge in Google technology. Whether you're interested in building your skills, meeting new friends, or getting a glimpse of the tech industry, we've got something for everyone. You'll get to work on real-world projects, enjoy interactive workshops, and even get some cool swag at our in-person events. So next slide, please. So the types of events that we run, we host a variety of events such as tech talks like this, study jams with cloud, machine learning, and even Android. Hands-on workshops like our one next Saturday actually. More info on that on our website and so on. Next slide. So a little bit about the Solutions Challenge. So the Solutions Challenge is an exciting opportunity for students to make a real impact using technology. It's all about coming up with innovative solutions to real-world problems using Google technology and coming up with innovative solutions to solve one or more of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So whether you're a coder, a designer, or just someone with a big idea, this challenge is for you. You'll get to work in a team, learn new skills, and maybe even win some amazing prizes. But the best part is you'll be creating something that could change lives and make the world a better place. Applications just closed in February for this year, but be sure to keep a lookout on our socials or next slide. Or even scan this QR code to learn more about it. The link here, which I'll pop in the chat really quickly, is uh, is this year's winners. Sorry. Take a look yourself and it might motivate you to take part in this challenge. So I'll just quickly send a link in the chat. People are interested. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Next slide, please. So now, as we gather here, we also celebrate the eve of International Women's Day, a day dedicated to honoring the achievements and contributions of women around the world. It is fitting that we have Gwenny with us here today. She is a pioneering cloud engineer with product manager of cloud compute, with a deep passion for DevOps, SRE, and education. As a Google developer expert in GCP and a Women Tech Makers ambassador, she actively promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM. Beyond her technical expertise, she's also a yoga instructor, mentor, and public speaker whose work amplifies the strength and resilience we commemorate on this special day. Please join me in welcoming Gwenny Warnick. Over to you, Gwenny.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Chloe, you'll just have to add the permission so that I can share.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
While we're doing that, can I just hear from you all? Are you all studying computer science? Is there anyone studying something different? Are you all heading in the dev direction? I just like to kind of know that before I talk because I'll tailor what I'm saying. And you can just pop it in the bit that says chat. Yeah, IT, cool. Do I need to data science? Awesome. Do I need to rejoin to get the permissions maybe?
I think we've already granted you as...
Yeah, it's worked. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that, everyone.
No worries.
I'll just bring you over so that I can see your questions as well. So just feel free to interrupt anytime. You can, I don't know if you can do hand up here. I don't think so. If you put stuff in the chat, I'll keep an eye on it as well. Ask me questions whenever. Add comments whenever, that's fine. Oh, does it make it smaller? Okay. It's a little hard to fit in, but I should be able to. So I like to start off with just my background because I have a really non-traditional background into tech, and I think that's good to share because just for anyone out there who's struggling with the studies or finds it hard, I'm, as you can see, completely non-technical background. So my background was music. That's what I did after university. I did a degree in classical double bass, and then I became a teacher. I played in lots of bands. I lived in Melbourne for 12 years, and I've just come back to Brisbane after 12 years in Melbourne. And I ended up learning to code for many reasons, but I got really frustrated basically as a curriculum developer. And when we had to create learning activities, they weren't like designed very well. And just excuse my voice. I've had the last 2 days off sick, so I'm a little bit like my throat's a bit blur, but hopefully it'll be clear enough. So I ended up also volunteering with groups like Girls in Tech. Now I run Women Who Code Melbourne and Cloudheads, both to shared like tech talks in the space of tech in general and Women Who Code Melbourne, and Cloudheads is like data platform, AI, SRE, and cloud, my favorite. And I ended up doing a boot camp. So I feel like you're already ahead of me if you already know what you wanted to do. I didn't know that tech was even an option for me until like, I think it was my 30s. So yeah, my mid 30s. And now I'm a GDE, as Chloe said. So that's also something you might be interested in, and that's available to you if you want to do that kind of thing. It gives you really cool opportunities like to talk and travel, connect with people all over the world in cloud. I did a LinkedIn learning course that was really cool on non-functional requirements in cloud. So that's really helpful if you want like a general understanding of things like security, compliance, availability, reliability, all of that stuff. And that's another topic I love talking on. So if I can do this, I'm sure you can do that and more. And we are talking today about Gemini, very, very popular topic. I usually talk about DevOps and cloud, but this is what I get asked to talk about more. So firstly, I thought I'd just set the scene. Is it chatbot, Gen AI, or conversational AI? I think these get mixed up a fair bit. So it is technically conversational AI, and chatbot is like a subcategory of that. Generative AI is like generating content from prompts. So ChatGPT is Gen AI. Conversational AI is trained on lots of text, including dialogue, and it's designed to give you that conversational feel when you're interacting with it, versus chatbot, which is often for more automated tasks, for example. So it is technically conversational AI. Has anyone been using it yet? Either Gemini or ChatGPT? If I had this while I was doing my boot camp, I would have done a lot better, I reckon. Yeah, awesome. That's great that you're using it. I also just searched it because I find that they change up very quickly. I'm sure you've noticed this as well. So back, I think last year sometime, last year sometime, I did a couple of talks on BART, well, more than a couple, but I also checked with it, what's the difference and is it conversational AI? Give me the difference. And it actually got that wrong. So this time I asked like just a direct question and actually did a pretty good summary this time. So I thought that was cool. I've found I just kind of tend to use Gemini now. I love it. I use it as like a brain dump. I use it when I'm trying to get my thoughts more kind of organized. I use it to validate my ideas. So I've been finding it really helpful. But I know with ChatGPT, there are really good tricks with the plugins, like where you can feed in a bunch of like text you've done, whether that's spoken or written, and then get it to generate text, for example, in that tone. So that's something cool. I don't know if you can do that with Gemini, maybe. But yeah, I think for those kind of different outputs, you just try them, you see what works better. For code, I think both of them are doing quite well right now. I got all of the images in this presentation from Gemini as well. So for this one, I wanted it to tell me like the possibilities in technology. The first one I thought was disgusting and I was like, no, these are awful. So I also find it really funny, the things it does well and the things it doesn't. So let's talk about what are the possibilities. And I looked at your curriculum at Monash, and I also thought about what like I did in boot camp. So I did a full stack web dev boot camp it was like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, then Ruby on Rails, and then MERN stack, like a full MERN stack app. So like MongoDB, Express.js, Next.js, and React. I think at uni you've got a lot more subjects than we had in the boot camp. But I thought I'd just start with a simple website, so like a landing page, because we often have to do like personal portfolios. Has anyone had to do that yet where you're at? Like a kind of personal web page? If you haven't, I'm sure you will. And I thought it did pretty well. So it gave the kind of code, and I wanted to test all of these because I've done it before and it had it tested and it not worked very well. So I just went to CodePen, and this first one's like just with the HTML. Second one, CSS, it styled it pretty neatly, which is nice, and that was responsive. Third one, I tested the form and it worked well, like as in it showed that it submitted. Thought I'd see, can it style? Can it add in something like that changes? And it added the code, had a fairly good explanation of what it could do. Then I just left it like that. So I was like, no, I want it to flash rainbows if you press the button and then go back. And there started to be errors then, but the code worked. So I did a little like screen grab.
It's not for the best, Caroline. None of this is for the best.
Oh, you can hear my voice. So I thought that was pretty cool, because I've tried that before and it wasn't very able to kind of cope with the changes. Once you started adding changes in, it just stopped working with those really quick initial tests. This image was meant to represent a Google Cloud Storage bucket, because I know that was something, you often need somewhere to store images in like any of the websites you're building. I thought the image was hilarious. I don't know if Google would have liked their logo looking like that, but whatever, they made it. So I asked, can you make the form to be something that can store an image in the Google Storage bucket? And it gave, again, a pretty good explanation. Have you got to the stage at uni where you're having to use cloud storage or use any of the elements in cloud computing? That's okay. You will, and you can just ask Gemini now. So that's great. You don't even need to do a formal study of like cloud stuff. It's just available to you online now, which is like really awesome. And just for anyone interested in it, like a side tangent story, I do know people that like I went into cloud from a web dev background, which is similar to what you're going to have. Data science, little bit different, but you'll also have that exposure to kind of code as well. And I just requested at an internship, could I do DevOps? And I think I was the one intern out of like, it was like 150 or something that did DevOps. And I used to get asked, how did you get to do that? And it was just because I'd gone to lots of meetups. I knew the area that I wanted to be in, and I was like direct about it. So I encourage you as well, while you're studying now, use those opportunities to kind of learn what you can, put those in your LinkedIn profile, your projects, and then in interviews, like be very clear what you're interested in. If it's cloud, awesome. If not, that's okay as well. But yeah, you can learn really just from the stuff online. So I worked with people when I was a cloud engineer that had career changed purely by doing certificates. I tried like an AWS certificate once and I was really traumatized. So you also don't have to do certificates. My whole career, I haven't done one. So those options are there. This one worked well. So it added the S3 bucket option in, and I tested it. It kind of uploaded a file from the computer successfully. So I thought that was pretty good for a start, especially if you're, in a job where you're having to do something like that and you've never done that before. I also started with something really the kind of first step you would have to do for something in cloud. So imagine you're working somewhere and you get given that. And it doesn't have to be GCP. I just wanted to see what it would do. Gave a pretty good explanation again, gave the code snippets. You also have the option to export, and they have this option to export to Replit. Have you used Replit before? It's like a online IDE. So I tried that, but I guess you wouldn't really, for a bot, that's awesome that you're already creating stuff like that. It's both that and CodePen I find really good for just quick stuff, when you like don't want to set up everything locally, or if you're on someone else's computer or something. I was kind of like, I wouldn't really want to open that in REPL IT, but it's good that it like was able to do it, I guess. And I just thought, is it clear about the equivalent across technologies? Can it give me that explanation? And it was pretty good with that as well. So it gave me a pretty good summary of what it involves, and it is different. It gave me a pretty good summary about what you would have to do, and also highlighted those key differences. So I was finding this time, especially compared to when I used it, like in maybe, I think it was like July last year a lot, the explanations are really helpful a lot of the time, both with debugging and with like summaries of stuff. I remember ChatGPT was like that too. So you'll also have to create READMEs. If you haven't had to yet, you will. And you can get lots of extra points with school kind of projects, for uni projects for that. So, but I think when you're new to them, it's a little bit like, what do I even put in this? So I just checked what would it recommend for that. And I thought the summary was awesome. So like description, you list out your frameworks, you list out the like local development instructions. So how someone would start from scratch to actually run the app, anything to kind of notice about. So like commands, you would put those in there, dependencies, like prerequisites, contributing, like if you have a kind of sourcing model where people can contribute code, and that's really common at organizations when you start to work, they might have a thing called inner sourcing where people contribute code from anywhere across the organization, even if it's not theirs. And then you might have heard of, and if you haven't, you will, outer sourcing, which is where, open sourcing, where like, I don't know why I called it outer, where people from across anywhere in the globe can contribute to a code base. So like the trend in the industry is often to go towards open source development because it's like an actively developed code base. The negative side of that is that it might be, unpaid people, and it relies on the exploitation of them. But everything depends. So that's a place you can go when you have to do your README. And I wanted to know if it could create it in Markdown, because that's, usually you'll have readme.md and it'll be in that format. I had to ask like 3 times, and that's where I did. So some of the things I think it's like not as great at. Can you guess what this image is for? I don't know if you'll be able to guess. It was for a web application. So I was like, okay, I'm going to segue into talking about a web app. It was a very creative image. So I wanted to know as well, okay, how can I create like a basic app? Can it do that? And again, pretty good with giving the explanation. It already knows what a Hello World app is, like we'd expect it to, but I find like the way it had given you the option to create it with just commands, like bash commands, versus manually setting it up like by clicking and creating the folders. Like I thought both of those were really good. Have you been learning to use the command line where you're like at the not level you're at, but like where in the curriculum you're at? Have you started to use the command line for creating anything? Yeah, cool. That's a really good skill. Yeah, awesome. So make sure you keep doing that, because it's like, I think it's really hard sometimes when you're new. And this is a great place you could come to ask questions if you don't know as well, as I'll show you a bit later. It was good at explaining like component, good at telling you what to add in, and it kind of did it for you. And I remember in the past, it wasn't as good at doing that. So when you started making changes, it wasn't as like clear. So I think it's already improved a huge amount. And it kind of had the information for how to create the app as well. I did that as well in RepLIT. I kind of set it up like that. But I kind of didn't finish it. I just thought, okay, that code looks like it'll work. And let's think about where you're at uni. Like, is there something you could use there that would be useful? That was its image of a university. And I said, can it be a university in Melbourne? And it just added the tree. I was like, okay, fine. So I looked at the learning outcomes. It was just like, I think the comp sci stuff. And I just picked like UML and polymorphism, because I remember when I was studying, I was like, what is a UML diagram? I'd like never heard of it. And I wanted to know, like, would this be something that could help if you just have no idea? I think it did pretty well. So I said, can you create like a UML diagram for a web app that takes payments? A really common example for a lot of code stuff. Gave classes with attributes, also methods. It was kind of more the attributes I was interested in. And I was wanting it to show me, you know, the visual, like with the relationship diagrams. If you haven't done them yet, you'll often see them as like, you know, boxes or tables like joined to each other. But it did kind of summarize those relationships. So that's probably the part that's hard when you're new as well, and the part that's confusing, and the concept that's important for the code side. So I thought it did pretty well with that. I asked, can you display it as a diagram, but it just did it like that, which is not what I wanted. So again, like a limitation, but I think in terms of the explanation, pretty good. This is its image for Java programming language. I don't know why. So I'd picked the example of polymorphism, and I wanted like a correct and an incorrect example. So it gave a good summary, an example, an explanation. And then the incorrect example explained like what wouldn't work. But like, you know, I think if you, I don't really know Java well, so I was kind of like, not sure I understand that, but it's still, I think, helpful to build like understanding. And again, the summary it pulled out, I thought was really helpful for the learning points. And I also wanted to ask, like, how can I test that example actually works? And even though I did a spelling mistake, I type really fast, so I often make little mistakes. It understood, so that was great. And it gave a really good explanation of this. And this one I did try in REPL-IT. When it was telling me to install Java, I was like, no, I just want to try it in REPL-IT. So I was like, can I understand that? And it was actually pretty good with that. So it gave detailed instructions, and I used the code that it had given me. And you can see over here, it did behave as expected. So that was cool. And I'd even forgotten like how you create a new project in a language. So it had covered that in the explanation. So that was really good as well. And this was my image for like something is not all sunshine and rainbows. And I had to really ask for the dark vibe. It said like, I don't know what I was thinking. But yeah, I just said dark dystopian vibe. And I was like, that's good enough. So because I just wanted to mention as well for you to be aware of as you're entering the industry and as you're studying about the risk side of it and the darker side of it. So WormGPT was released pretty quickly after ChatGPT. So it's a Gen AI tool, and it just doesn't have any of those like ethical boundaries in place. So it can do like whatever, and it can be exploited unethically. So it's already being used. It was kind of being used instantly, as you can imagine. And I think it's been used recently as well to do a successful phishing attack, and also a successful spam attack. Was kind of just looking at the news. So worth being aware as well, there's models like that. And it's just a reminder for us, we need to be secure when we're using tools like this. And we need to, if we're in an organization, so a lot of large enterprises initially banned Gen AI, and now they're kind of starting to bring it in, but in a restricted way. So worth just being aware of those issues as well. And I thought we would just, after the calls, also look at just how the ways I thought it might be useful in everyday life. I don't know if you've used it for this as well, but I love it for like my everyday life kind of stuff. And I remember while studying, it was like a lot to juggle if you're working as well in particular. So one thing was like a monthly budget, and I was like, okay, how's it going to be with that? I still am like learning to manage money better. So I thought, okay, maybe it'll give me a good idea. And it gave a pretty nice template for that, I think, and pretty good outline. I didn't go further with it. I feel like you could have. And I also asked it for like a workout plan for like full body strength, using just like what someone would have at home. And it was pretty good with that, I thought. Pretty good explanations. So that's something as well, if you're just like needing to move your body a bit. But I found with, that's actually when I became a yoga teacher, and I'm never doing it at the moment, but I did it when I knew I was going into tech, because I thought I'm just going to be sitting all the time. So you really do have to kind of think of those ways to move your body while you're working. I also thought, in honor of the like the pay gap information, when you start working, you know, can it help me negotiate like something like that? And I just said, okay, I need you to make me to pay me more. I don't know if you've seen on like Instagram those examples of people getting like phrases to be more professional sounding. So it's also really good for that, I think, if you just want to like thought dump and actually then have it written up into an email. I think both ChatGPT and Gemini are really good for that. So the example down the bottom, I thought was really good that it gave. And I asked for like a menu for 3 meals a day with like restricted dietary stuff. I have like weird dietary restrictions. And this again was like pretty good. Had some good ideas, little snack ideas. And oh, cool. Thanks, Juan. Yeah, I saw that come up actually when I was searching about it. Thank you. I just didn't do it. I was being lazy. I think I rushed through that, so I've ended very quickly. So does anyone have questions about, and you can ask me about Gemini. We can go through it if you like online. I'm also happy to answer questions about like DevOps, working in cloud. And what I did after that was I became like a principal engineer / DevOps coach. And then I have just in the last 6 months I switched to the product side from engineering, although it's still technical. So I'm the product manager of cloud compute at a large enterprise. So yes, ask me whatever you like.
Actually, I have watched some of the comparison between the Gemini models and the ChatGPT model, but a lot of the comparison is kind of like biased to one of the models. So I want to ask you, like, what exactly do Gemini compare to the latest model of OpenAI, which is GPT-4?
Yeah, like the paid version though, you mean, of ChatGPT? Yeah, so I don't have the paid version. It did on, if I go back, I'll just go back to that slide. It actually summarized, because ChatGPT, one of the negatives with it, or negatives, like I think it's a negative if you want up-to-date information. But one of the kind of key differences is that Gemini is able to access the internet like to date, where ChatGPT isn't. And it did have that summary about the newer training for ChatGPT. So it is only up to 2023. So for example, if you're looking up something like a huge news item that happened in like recently, it's not going to be there as an example. I remember when I started looking at them, I think ChatGPT, because it was only up to 2019 when it started, I think. And we were like in the middle of COVID, but then like it didn't know about that as another example. So yeah, I think the other difference is that ChatGPT is paid for you to be able to use it like more than a little bit. So it depends as well. Like Gemini has, I would argue, and I don't think I'm biased. Like I've used both. I like both. But Gemini, you can use that for free. So if you don't have the budget, like I think it's a lot more accessible. I've also seen comparisons of the debugging where ChatGPT is better with certain languages at debugging code examples. But they've both developed a fair bit. That was like at the end of last year. They've both developed a fair bit already since then. So it's kind of changing so far. So I feel like my comparison that I was kind of doing was, a while ago, and that now it's just changing like every month. And that there was a really big update that Gemini, when it was Bard, did. And that I think pushed the capabilities of it really far ahead. So for example, it was multimodal earlier, and I believe can do more multimodal stuff still. Although of course, ChatGPT, I'm sure we're just going to see from now on, they keep, catching up and doing more than each other from now on, kind of thing. We're now just going to see these all keep evolving. So yeah, I think it depends on like your task. So I thought the summary it gave here is very fair. Like if I wanted to write like a piece of text in my tone of voice, I know ChatGPT has a plugin for that and I would use it. For everything else, just because Gemini's, but I don't pay for it. So for everything else, I just tend to use Gemini. But when ChatGPT started, I was using it and it was also really useful. So yeah, I think it kind of depends on the task. And if it's like something creative based on a prompt, like that's what generative AI is for, right? And for text. So it was trained on a bunch of text. The difference with Gemini was trained on a wider range of texts, and it was also trained to be conversational. So it's going to have most likely a more natural sounding language. And I have seen that, like with ChatGPT, it can tend to have those kind of cookie cutter responses or quite generic sounding responses, depending on like the genre of what you're writing. So yeah, I would just say it depends. I can't answer your question directly because I don't pay for ChatGPT, because I don't see the need to. Do you pay for it? Like, do you see that it's like working really well in something?
I think it's normally what I'm doing is like Gemini and ChatGPT, the non-pay version is doing this thing. But I just know that GPT is utilizing real-time data, so it's a huge difference from the Gemini utilize real-time data. It's a very huge difference from the GPT models. Yeah, and thank you so much for your response.
Yeah, of course, it's a great question. And Audrey, do I have a recommended way of wording questions in order to get a more precise answer? Yeah, so prompt engineering. I do think it's a little bit trial and error, and also because they're changing all the time and because they kind of store what you've been saying, depends what you've kind of been doing before. So I've done really long, long things over days, for example, and I found it really helpful for that. But in terms of code stuff, I've only done it as like, tests. So for example, for stuff like this, like, and I want to see, okay, does this work? Does this work? So in the other talk, I have given a lot on Gemini. It was before it was called Gemini. That was more focused on DevOps. So I wanted to see, can it do all the stuff we do in cloud? Can it like spin me up a server? Can it tell me how to write a script, like a script of commands to do something like spin up a server? So kind of real world examples of what I would need to know, and also stuff that is not necessarily easy to know when you're a beginner, particularly in something like cloud that can be quite abstract. So I was kind of using it to just see, could it get me further along, like to a certain point where I was able to actually do something. And I did find it was generally good for that kind of entering into something. But also sometimes I believe both ChatGPT and Gemini, they have these, hallucinations. So sometimes they tell you stuff that's true and it's just absolutely not. And some of the time that doesn't matter. But if you're less experienced in something, or you're using it to like change into a different area or learn a new language, for example, which you're all going to do when you get into your jobs, I think that it still has an element of trial and error. And I'd also asked it, because I think the other kind of risk of using something like this and relying, I think we know not to rely on it, but, we are going to try and use it to help us. The risk is, having security gaps in code, for example. And I found it was pretty good. So I asked it a fair amount of questions around things like secrets management. So protecting passwords, protecting keys, and also real world examples of like what I've seen in my job. So like what you're doing at uni, whether you've done it or you will, like in a later subject, you'll have to manage things like API keys, or you'll have like tokens that you have to manage. In an enterprise, there's going to be hundreds of things like that. And they're going to have to all be rotated at certain like cadences so that they're protected and they're more secure. So I asked it stuff like that, like, can it create me a script to rotate tokens? And could it summarize for me the risks with secrets management? And could it find for me in a piece of code, could it make that more secure? So it was pretty good at giving me summaries of like protecting against something like remote code execution, for example. And I think if you combine it with the information we have from those areas, so like OWASP, all their kind of, their top 10 security vulnerabilities, they have one for applications and they have one for CI/CD. So continuous integration, continuous deployment. which is talking about like the pipelines and the way we're going to push a change in our code right through into CI, which is just look like we haven't gone to production yet. We're kind of testing it in our own environment and then pushing it through to production, which is CD. So I think if you're kind of juggling it with just being aware of what can potentially go wrong and asking it to help you do that, it's probably going to get you a lot of the way. Oh, sorry, that's my cat. And then there'll still be points where, you need a person, you need to talk to someone, you need to pair with someone, because I think what they're good at is giving you that general understanding. But once it gets into specific examples, for example, in an enterprise where often things are really locked down and behind virtual private clouds, it might not be as like accurate in that environment. But I think it should be really helpful for uni projects. And Mohammed, I actually think I was and I didn't. I'm not sure. Because I'm a GDE, we get early access, and that's another reason it's cool to do stuff like that. We get early access to stuff, but I'd kind of just started as a PM in the last 6 months, and I was, pretty overwhelmed with like starting that, and like I was still speaking. I speak quite a lot, so I just was like, oh, I'll look at it at some point, but then I don't think I did. So I think possibly, but I didn't. Tane, I'm not sure if you still can. Often you can sign up for a waiting list and like get it early, but I'm not actually sure, sorry, with Gemini. Like it's there at the moment. Let me just like search. Let's just ask it. I have to find my window. I pulled all my windows down because I've got like so many. So see my little school image. Oh, maybe I broke it. That's another thing I actually found quite good with Gemini. There isn't really a limit, like, or I didn't hit the limit and I used it like a ridiculous amount. Whereas with, I'll just go to this page and start it from fresh, see if that's better. Oh, it's because I've gone into my work account. Yeah, so I found with Gemini, you can do quite a lot and never hit the limit. I'm pretty sure with the free version of ChatGPT, you can hit that limit pretty early. So I'll just say, how can I get early access to 1.5 Gemini? We'll see if it helps us. Okay, so you can join the wait list. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure like we also join wait lists. So yeah, that's like the process, and they'll give it too early. Nice. Cool. Any other questions I can help with?
I did have a question.
Yeah.
But it's more towards your background. So I was thinking, as someone who is interested, I guess, in the world of cloud computing and DevOps, what would you say are the most essential areas I should focus on as a beginner and build that understanding while also integrating like the DevOps practices into my learning journey? So any personal tips or insights would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, let me just capture the second part. So the most essential areas for cloud and DevOps, like as a beginner. And what was the second part about integrating it?
So focusing on how to build the understanding while also integrating DevOps practices.
Like now at uni?
Yeah, like projects or like what kind of projects, basically.
Yeah. I'm just writing this down. My memory is like terrible. If I'm ever in job interviews, I have to like write down every word of the question, or I literally start speaking and then I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you asked me. That's a good interview tip, actually. If you're someone like that, like just write it down. And I thought it was uncool when I first did it. And then I've just had so many compliments on how they were like, wow, we were so impressed that you took notes. So go ahead, steal that tip. So the most essential areas for cloud and DevOps as a beginner, I think it's got to be like, firstly, I think anything you do, it's got to be in line with what you're into, right? It's got to like feel good for you. So for me, like I went to lots of different meetups. I like didn't understand a word that they were saying. I felt really confused. I'm also an introvert, so I like didn't really want to go, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to go to stuff and listen and let it kind of wash over me and get an idea of the different areas there are in technology. the different languages, the different ways that people apply those languages, like why we might use a language over another, for example. And for cloud and DevOps, the reason I was kind of drawn to them was I researched what they were myself, I think. And I felt in the bootcamp environment, it was very like and the whole of programming had a bit of a kind of competitive vibe, like the kind of move fast and break things, like that kind of like slogan. I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to move like at an appropriate speed with clear instructions, and I want to follow the instructions and actually get it right. Like, I don't want to not know what I'm doing and just try stuff until it works. That's like my worst nightmare. So I really liked DevOps because it was more about, and sorry, there was also the challenges where you like did challenges and you did coding challenges and you like were ranked. And I was like, that absolutely doesn't appeal to me. And it made me feel like I didn't belong as well. So DevOps is much more like a learning culture, and it's much more about removing silos. So sharing knowledge across different areas. About like uplifting others is how I feel it. Like, that's not the wording they use, but it's about helping others, sharing the knowledge you have, making knowledge really available and like consumable for people, building a culture where we're looking at like what makes teams high performing, and we're like working towards that, harnessing kind of metrics to do that as well. So if you haven't heard of, there's things like called the Dora metrics, which are pretty well known in the industry. And that came out of, there was a book called Accelerate. And then it's Google has actually acquired it. So they own Dora metrics now, but there's a project called 4 Keys. I'll just find the link as well. So that is something that you could do at uni, but I don't know if it would like, it wouldn't work for all kind of stuff, but it's something that's worth being aware of. So that's something you can run over a repo, and it can tell you like these metrics that you can measure that are tied to high performing teams. So just even being aware of those concepts is really good, because once you start in a role, there are organizations like, for example, Dora metrics. We have them available to all teams at all times where I work. Not all companies will have that, but it's something, that knowledge is something you can bring like in as a person starting as well. And in terms of cloud, and this is also kind of related, Audrey, to your question, so specific certs like to recommend. In terms of cloud and DevOps, so DevOps is a set of like tools, practices, and processes that help us bring like the development and operation sides of things together. So the history of it is that previously, and we can't imagine it now, but developing like an application, for example, would take like 2 years, and they'd get the requirements at the start, develop, finish developing, print it on like a CD or something, and then hand it over. And then in the company, there was a separate operations team, and they'd like never seen the code before. They'd never seen it being developed. They didn't have that context, but they were the ones who had to troubleshoot when something went wrong, like when it was running live. So there was this idea of a movement towards bridging that gap, and the idea of you build it, you run it, which is what you'll all be walking into in most companies. So the reason that it's good to know about is because you're not really going to be able to avoid it in a lot of situations as well. The kind of running things is moving into the developers like realm, which it didn't before. So what concepts you can be aware of are the ones you're going to study when you do like a full stack app, for example, and you deploy it to production. Also, when you're using any kind of cloud elements. So when you're using things like servers, when you're, they can be physical servers, but in cloud, there's always the equivalent of the physical infrastructure. So just like asking yourself like how applications work, like what is powering it, thinking about that, thinking if this app was serving like 1 million times the traffic or something like, or 1 million people, would it still work? How could we make it work so that it was scalable and so that it could take that much traffic? And then like we think, okay, what if we wanted it to be able to work? Most of the time it didn't get traffic. And then in like 30 minutes, like there was a spike and it had to like handle. Would the way we've designed the code still work? And you can just start thinking about those concepts, because they get extended into cloud, because when you're running something on cloud, you're going to choose your cloud infrastructure to kind of make that situation work better depending on the requirements of your app. So I think like just learning about those concepts is really helpful, and just thinking about things as you're building them and how they work and like what might happen to them to like to break them, for example, and then how you might fix that. And in terms of like more specific cloud knowledge, so like what Audrey's asking, Tanae, cloud and cloud computing are like interchangeable. You'll often hear, although like cloud, really what it kind of means, or the cloud, it means IT resources served over the internet. That's all it means. So we have physical cloud resources, like we have a server, like you have in your laptop, you have like CPU, you have memory. In the cloud, it just means that someone found a way to programmatically abstract that and then like rent it to you. So it means you can pay for what you use. As opposed to in the past, if you ran a company or something, what would you have to do? You would have to go and buy that server and put all like hundreds of servers and have them in a room. You would have to go and buy all of that stuff up front. So it was a really high upfront cost. And then where do you put them? You have to put them in a room. You have to pay for the electricity. You have to pay for air conditioning to keep them cool. You have to pay for security because you don't want someone like stealing your data. So all of that now you don't have to do because you can use it through the cloud. And it just means like using those IT resources over the internet. And the term cloud service provider is those people like Amazon. So Amazon have Amazon Web Services, AWS. Google have GCP, Google Cloud Platform. Microsoft have Azure. And then there are a bunch of other smaller ones, or like ones that don't have as much of the market, like Oracle's a really name you've probably heard, but it's not as common. IBM also in the earlier days it owned, a lot of the legacy code that you'll work with is from IBM. So those kind of, let me come to the certificate. Are there specific certificates? So again, like I said, you don't have to do a cert. All three of those big clouds have the kind of entry-level kind of cloud computing concepts, like essentials. You can do those. You can pick any cloud you want. Amazon has the market share. Microsoft is trying to pitch itself as like really great for DevOps. Like they have Azure DevOps, which just means like running things almost at scale and in an optimized way, and for things like machine learning. Google Cloud, the thing I like about GCP, and I don't think I'm biased, this is what drew me to GCP in the first place. They've always cared about engineering experience, and they've always put that at the forefront. They're the only cloud service provider that does that. So they developed this concept of site reliability engineering themselves internally. They developed containerization technology, which we know is now like Kubernetes or containers. You'll hear about that. So that's just like little baby computers running essentially, or not even computers, little baby applications with all the stuff it needs to run just in an isolated environment. Or more technically, it's a set of processes running. So they developed all of that, and then they've shared that knowledge. They've given Kubernetes to like open source, right? So you can pick whichever cloud you want, and it doesn't matter. Like you'll get hit up to work on all of them, even if you choose one. They all have the same concepts. They all implement things slightly differently. So that's something that's really annoying. You do have to learn like different language. So like Google Cloud Storage Bucket is S3, for example, in Amazon. And they're all like, I shouldn't say stupid names, but like they are often stupid. And you're like, why are you making me learn all these like terms? But that's the environment. So yeah, just I think getting used to some of the ideas and doing those beginner like courses is really good. Depends how you learn as well. So if you like certifications and you're someone that likes having the external accountability, then like either a formal like course, like something on Udemy or on, I always forget the name now, it's been acquired, but like a Cloud Guru and Pluralsight, they used to be. LinkedIn Learning has some really good ones as well. So if you like that way of learning, like a certificate is a good thing to do. If you don't like the pressure of that, you can still do it just by like exposing yourself to that information. In terms of actually practicing it, things like labs are really good. So Google Cloud, like quick labs are amazing. And you can often get credit being in a group like GDSC. And when you have these study jams, you get free credits. So those are really good ways to learn the concepts. If you get those free opportunities, so as students, you'll probably get other opportunities like that. Whichever cloud you get those opportunities, like I would take them. if you have the energy, and just start getting kind of used to those concepts. And then, specifically like certification wise, again, it kind of depends on the area you're interested in. I would start with the entry level one. And then if there's an area you're more drawn to, do those more like specialized ones. I personally wouldn't take those exams early, but I found it really stressful. Like I tried to do a really advanced like SysOps one when I'd been learning for 6 months, and I was like super traumatized. So like just don't get traumatized. Like do it in a way that feels good for you. Yeah, and then Tanae, how is Gemini related to cloud computing briefly? What would you need to do for entry-level pathways into cloud? So I just literally asked at an internship, can I do DevOps? Which is like, you'll hear them interchanged in the industry, even though like technically DevOps is a set of processes, tools, and practices to bridge like development and operations, and also to deliver value to customers faster. And then on the flip side, cloud computing just means accessing IT resources in the cloud, like over the internet. But they get interchanged a lot of the time. How is Gemini related? Like, so Gemini, I guess the way it's related is firstly, it's powered by the cloud. Like the whole reason we can even create things like this is because we have the power of cloud computing. If you needed to power this with like physical infrastructure, it'd be difficult and it would slow you down. So the whole reason we have these fields like big data, machine learning, generative AI, like exploding now, is because we have the compute power to power them, because we have cloud computing. So how it relates is it was developed it's powered by cloud resources. So like it would use a lot of memory, for example. It is also trained on large language models. So that's machine learning. And that means it's using a huge amount of like processing power to train using like basically ingesting data and learning like from that data kind of thing. So that's kind of, I guess it's not related directly, like as in you don't learn cloud computing and learn about generative AI necessarily, even though they're kind of connected. The field of AI, like artificial intelligence, is kind of, it's really machine learning at the moment. True AI like doesn't exist yet in terms of AI that like eclipses human intelligence. And everything is currently still trained like on models or like by ingesting text, for example. But yeah, you can also study in that area, but it would be called like AI more of the time. So in the data science field, like there's going to be a little bit more connection to that, because data science is like the amount to analyze large amounts of data, we need to use machine learning. The amount of time it takes to analyze large sets of data isn't going to be done in a human lifetime on our existing computers. It's got to be in the cloud because of the amount of extra power we have. So in terms of the second part, what would you need to do for entry-level pathways into cloud? I think just have an interest. When you're starting out in an entry-level role, they're hiring you for your interest and for your enthusiasm. And there are lots of places that have opportunities where you can go into cloud. So like Mantle Group is a really good one. They have like programs where they take people in straight out of uni and you can do cloud. I did mine at NAB. I also did Mantle Group, but I did NAB first, the bank. They're like the largest hirer of technology interns in Australia, I think. It's like second by the Army, with the exception of Victoria, where I think they're the second largest, but in Victoria, they're the largest. So they take in like, I think it's like 150 interns at their intakes. Other big banks do it as well. MYOB, I know, does intake that I think can get a little into cloud, but I think it's predominantly Java. So yeah, I would say look for the entry-level programs, whether that's like an internship or it could be like ThoughtWorks have, I can't remember how long it is off the top of my head. I think it's 2 years, might be a year and a half. They also have a program that's for entry level. Look for those programs, look for those opportunities, keep an eye out for like free boot camps and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff aimed at students. Keep an eye out for things like study jams that they have with Google, and other clouds have similar things. And these groups are a really good way as well, because you're going to get exposed to the kind of concepts around cloud. I've done a lot of talks for GDSE groups. So these groups are like are really good. Keep coming to those events, and also request to your organizers, like, we want some more stuff on cloud, or like, we want an intro to cloud course. So I've done intro to cloud for quite a few like boot camps, both here and in New Zealand, and for GDSEs. So yeah, other than that, just like learning yourself, like reading about the concepts and just starting to get your head around them, because it's all 100% learnable, like as I'm evidence of, but it is pretty abstract, a lot of the concepts. So it takes a bit of time to like get the ideas, like have them sink and kind of have a mental model formed about them. So it can be a little bit like, I think the earlier you start just reading about it, that's really good as well. So yeah, I think that's how I would answer that. And if you're really interested in being in cloud, be really upfront about that, or like only apply for places where you have that opportunity. And if they don't have it on paper, ask them in the interviews, would you consider having me work in cloud some of the time, like, or with the DevOps team or something like that? In the one when I did it, it wasn't on paper. It was just a technology internship for software engineering. So if I just had thought that, I would never have even had the opportunity, you know, but it's definitely worth always asking. So it could be like, hey, I know this is a software engineering, but I'm really interested in data. Like, can I have an opportunity to go in that area in this internship? Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other
Thank
questions?
you, Gwenny.
You're welcome.
I think we have one last question.
Yeah, you can. Yep. I did it self-learning. I don't have any like qualifications on paper in terms of like cloud. I also, like I said earlier, I worked with people who, like, I worked with a man who career changed into cloud from like, I don't know, it was a trade or something, like something totally non-technical. And he just did cloud certifications and taught himself like at home. So you can definitely actually get into the industry that way. And I think it's the first time that's been possible. So there's just so much information that's available. Where it's a little trickier is like to do yourself is actually applying it. So like it's pretty easy. It's not easy, but when you know what you're doing, you can like spin up a web app, right? You can like, you know, if you learn where you can do that and how you can kind of practice it somewhere. With cloud infrastructure, it's a little hard to do that without having to pay a lot. So there's like a lot of jokes about people trying to use like AWS EC2 instance, which is like a virtual machine, like a basically cloud compute power. And then waking up to like, you know, a $30,000 bill. And there's actually headlines of like university students doing that. So that's why I think it's good to have these groups, because you get access to the kind of study jams, which have free credits. And then keeping an eye out for those kind of events, and they come through these groups through AWS and Azure have them as well. And then like study like courses. So like on LinkedIn Learning, where they might have a practical element, where they might have a bunch of like scripts or like scripts or code that you can use, even if you can't like actually practice it. But yeah, the labs are probably the best ones, I think, like the Google Cloud Labs. I'll see if I think they're called like Cloud Skills Boost or something now. Can't remember if they went back to, to.
I found it if you want me to send in the chat.
Yeah. So you can also just ask like GDSE, like, when can we get credits? And they can ask kind of Google. Okay, I already have an account. I don't know why it's doing this to me. But yeah, it can usually like sign straight in. Yeah, I do have it. Cool. So you can get, so I think that's my wrong account, because I've got like thousands of credits. But yeah, you can get credits when you do the study jams or the designated kind of study activities. I think some of the dev fests also sometimes give credits depending on the activity. And then when you go into these kind of, you can look at learning paths, and you can look for, that's just a Google Cloud one. And you can just like see what they have and then try like those learning paths. Oh, let me go back. So they actually give you the commands, and then they give you like the online console, and also they spin up all the infrastructure, and you can actually do what you would actually do like in a job without having to pay for the infrastructure. I have these because I've done like all these things. So like the kind of anything about infrastructure, cloud infrastructure is really helpful. And that's where DevOps is often managing, like platform and infrastructure stuff. You can see here foundational infrastructure tasks. We could also call that platform engineering. So yeah, probably getting the credits is like the best way.
Thanks for sharing.
But yes, you can do it without qualifications for sure.
Right. Thank you. Do you mind pulling up the thank you slide one?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for crafting some time to give this talk. We appreciate it as GAC Monash.
Pleasure.
Awesome. And stop the